Is your settlement too cold all the time? Are you sick of those fire barrels getting smoke everywhere? And what about decor? There's gotta be something better than just a campfire. Well, there is. Custom fireplaces. You can build them yourself. It's so easy. Whether your settlement is at a terrible location or just filled with terrible people, we have the fireplace for you. So stay tuned for a free exclusive demonstration. Hello everyone, it's Angela and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be building a few different fireplace examples. And the first one is a copy of the one that I did in my most recent tour at Coastal Cottage. So I've laid out some of the supplies for you. I did lay out a few too many piles of cinder blocks, so you only need I think 5 piles of cinder blocks is what I used, but the extras you can definitely use if you want to make it taller or if you want to patch up some holes or something. Something didn't align right, you can definitely use that to patch things up. So to start off, we're going to use this sort of fireplace, empty fireplace. And you can definitely use the clean one with the wood in it already if you want, but it will not have the fire going. So this empty one enables us to use the campfire. So then you put the campfire in there and then you cover up the rocks with these jersey blocks. And I used 2 of them so that most of the rocks get covered. The rocks are deceptively big. You wouldn't think they'd be out that far, but they are. So I actually put these blocks in place and then I moved the fireplace or the fire back just a little bit. And you'll want to make sure you do this almost immediately afterwards because you won't get a chance to do it again once you start building more of your fireplace. So for the chimney, I decided to use brick because I think the brick looks very traditional. And I liked the way it looked in my Coastal Cottage, so I decided to replicate that here. You can definitely use whatever material you want. And if you end up using some that are modeled after the concrete walls, you may not have to do this step with the pillars on either side. But just because they're a lot thicker, but for most materials or walls, you will have to do this. You can also use maybe a concrete pillar or use, that same model of the pillar with a different retexture of some stone or something. But either way, you're going to want both sides to be covered so that it sort of hides the fact that, the piping doesn't go all the way up through the ceiling. So on either side of the fireplace, you're going to want to start building with these concrete blocks. And so you're going to end up making 2 pillars on either side of the fireplace itself. But this one, we're going to put these 2 stacks of 3, and then we're going to go ahead and put this plywood piece in right afterwards, right on top. You can use this as maybe a shelf or just to separate the the cinder blocks, for visual interest or whatever. You don't even have to use it if you don't want to, but I think that it helps kind of make it look structurally sound because you're going to end up with a lot of these cinder blocks up on front as sort of the stone face of your fireplace. So we're going to put these in here and complete our 2 pillars on either side. So this is really what it's going to look like when it's done, hidden behind all the rest of everything. And it's not too bad if you don't get them lined up perfectly, but you want to make sure that you get them mostly lined up. So I'm going to use 3 of these sets of 2 to make the face of the fireplace that we're going to put our second piece of plywood up on top of. And you don't have to worry about them being too straight or not too straight either way, but I like to make sure that they, turn out nice and even. Of course, it is personal choice, so, if you want to make it look like it was built by someone who doesn't know how to build anything, then, definitely make it look scrappy and and unaligned. But as I As you can see here, I am going to try to make it as straight as possible. So I ended up messing up that plywood piece. So I'm going to have to go back in and find another one of the same kind. There we go. This time I do it right. I'm going to line it up perfectly, or almost perfectly. And this one, I always like to stick it out just a little bit farther because I want it to have sort of an actual shelf feel. And of course, you have your two smaller pillars that are going to go on either side of the fireplace itself. They're more decorative than anything, but they do hide those cinder blocks. They do hide the cinder blocks behind. So each of these tours is going to have an undecorated sort of glimpse at our finished product afterwards, and then we're going to go and have our decorated tours after that, so you can see how they look in a room with furniture. Here's our second fireplace. It's not really a fireplace, it's more of a wood stove, but you're going to need a couple concrete blocks, a curved concrete wall, a curved floor. This pipe is from the CVA menu. It is in the 00 or 01 toggles, I can't remember which. But you also need a couple half walls and a fire barrel. This fire barrel is one of my favorite pieces to work with in terms of, the fire or lighting, and so I wanted to do something cool with it. And recently I had been talking to Donald Strong, who is an amazing builder. He had built a little place for, like a wood stove fireplace area, and he didn't have a fire, like a wood stove, and so I kind of got a little bit of inspiration from this. He ended up building a really cool wood stove, but I don't have access to, external assets, so I thought I would try to replicate this a little bit in PS4 Fallout. I guess that's its own thing now. So in the back I have put a couple of these walls. I chose the stone, but you can definitely choose whatever ones you want. Some wood paneling, or something that maybe makes it look like a log cabin, or whatever your heart desires. However, I would suggest that with whatever piece you choose for the round floor or the curved piece on the bottom, you choose the same matching pillars, because these pillars really bring it together and make it look like it was an intentional thing. So this is probably the easiest fireplace out of all of them. They're all pretty easy. The first one was a little bit more difficult in terms of making sure you put things in the correct order, but this one went up very, very quickly. So finally we're going to put in our pipe, and you want to make sure that your floor aligns with that bottom piece of the bottom rung of the fire barrel, so that it looks a little bit more like a pot-bellied stove kind of thing. This last one we're going to be building, you're going to need a couple scaffolding pieces, a square metal floor, 3 of the half wall pieces, some grating, a pallet, a campfire, and a cooking station. The cooking station is optional. If you don't want to use that, you can use various pots and pans for decoration, but the cooking station is easy. The grating comes from the CVA mod as well. It is in the miscellaneous tab. So we're going to start off with our scaffolding here, and we're going to be building something similar to like a pizza oven kind of thing. And I would suggest that you try to build it in a corner, just so that it's easier for you to line up some of the pieces with the scaffolding so it doesn't get ridiculously crooked. When you're building with the scaffolding, one thing that you definitely have to remember is how tall your campfire is going to be, and then also how tall your cooking station is going to be, or how much room you want in between the two, because you don't want your campfire to be too far, away from, the pots and pans and stuff that you're going to be using to cook with, because that's just doesn't really work if you're trying to cook something. So it might take you a couple tries to get it, just right, but it is definitely looks good whenever you get it done. And I'm having trouble trying to get my Place Anywhere tool to actually work with the grating and stuff there, but I finally got it to work. So you're going to want to start putting these pieces in. I line them up with the top of the scaffolding or the top of the pipes, and just sort of glitch them in as best as I can. Of course, I'm going to glitch this on top first so it stays out of my way. But this is where your grating's going to go, is right in between, because this is your cooking surface. So then finally, here we go, back to the walls. You want to make sure they line up with the top of the scaffolding poles. And if you use these thin pieces like I did, you might have a more difficult time glitching them in. You'll see here I messed this one up, and I can't really fix it here because it won't let me fix it. So I fixed it before the final tour, but that just goes to show you that you do have to be very careful whenever you're lining things up. If you use some of maybe the concrete half walls, you'll have a little easier time because they're a lot thicker. So we're going to go ahead and put in this last piece and make sure that it fits perfectly into place. And then we're going to go ahead and move on and do our pallet. The pallet is really just, you know, a shelf kind of thing, a top, you know, so things don't get in on the top, and it really just completes the look. Nothing else. If you wanted to go, you know, the full 9 yards and put in piping, you could definitely do that. You could install, you know, some sort of a piping thing on the back so that it pipes out the smoke. But here we're going to put in our fire, which is going to heat our food, and then we're going to put our cooking station in. Ta-da! Perfect. So these are our completed fireplaces. This first one I went with a Christmassy kind of look with oven mitts as the stockings and some of those CVA Christmas lights. I think it turned out pretty well. The second one turned into a hunting lodge, so you can see you can definitely hang whatever you want on those walls up behind the little wood stove. You can put things on the shelves and really just go crazy and make it nice and cozy. And finally, I built a little apartment around this brick oven. I moved it across the room and put in, you know, some decent living areas here. So that is it, guys. I hope you liked it and got some useful tips to use in your own settlements. As always, hit that like, subscribe, and feel free to leave me a comment below with what you thought. See you next time.